So I have a test account on Stripe. I don't use this for anything at the moment. It's just not even activated or anything, but I've been doing testing on it. You can see I have tons of money coming in, but it's only test data, so don't worry. I just need my API keys, so I'll grab those. I don't really care if you see my secrets because I'm not going to use this account. So what I want to do is activate our credentials file, and you can do that with Rails 5.2. And the beauty of that is it's encrypted, and that's nice because it's very secure, and you can version control the credentials file and share the master key only with people that you want. Kind of like 1Password, but not as fancy and pretty looking. And it's all via command line. So what I want to do is pass in this string, and it's kind of goofy, but you're basically running this background task to create or edit your credentials file, which comes by default in any Rails app. If I can type, I'll show you right in your config file. You'll see a credentials yml.enc. It's totally encrypted. You can't really depict what the hell that is, but once we open this file, that file becomes readable. So we'll do this. It should hopefully open up. There we go. By default, every Rails app has a secret key base. This one's mine. I don't really care if you know about it. But what I want to add is 2 more Stripe specific ones, and you can add more here. So I'll do publishable key, pk test, Stripe, secret key, and I will go and grab that real quick, paste that in. Once you close this file and save it and close it, it will save it and re-encrypt it, which is cool. One caveat to using this is it used to be you could do stuff like this, at least that I know of, and access things on specific environments, like your production environment, your development environment. I think they're gravitating towards the way of just using one set of keys everywhere, which is kind of hard to think about. I don't know the best approach there, but this way in particular is nice to keep it version controlled, so anyone has access to all the keys at any given point, because there's always that thing that could prohibit you from using a third party or service or something just because you don't have the key, which is annoying in a team environment for sure, which I've run into that. So long story short is this is how we're going to work with this. So I'll go ahead and save it down. And key thing to note is remember what names you give it here, because to edit it you have to enter that command again and again. So we'll go ahead and close it, and you'll notice Rails updated that behind the scenes, so they saved it. So cool. That gives us in our application layout file the public key we need, publishable key. If you recall, way early on I added this tag, and that's going to be responsible for grabbing our public key from that file, and we can grab it through our credentials call like this. So Rails application credentials, and then the name of the thing you gave it, so Stripe publishable key. So if all goes right, assuming I updated my credentials, I might reboot my server just for safety's sake, and view source on my app and see if that's coming through the pipe after we refresh. So there it is. It's exactly what we want. We just want access to that public one so Stripe can look for it and know what to do with it. On top of that, we need to initialize our gem. We've installed Stripe in the first video, I think. So here it is there in our gem file. If you haven't, go ahead and add that and then run bundle. And what I'll do is go to the config, initializers, and create a file called Stripe. .rb. And that I'm going to make just the API connection so the gem knows where my stuff is, basically. So it's going to look like this. Let me find it. Stripe API key equals Rails dot application. Same kind of thing we had in the view. Credentials. Only this one's the secret key. Credentials Stripe secret key. Awesome. So anytime you modify something like that, again, you know what to do. Reboot that mother. And looks like something's up there. Component undefined method API. Oh, I think I typed that wrong. Yeah, it should be API underscore key. So one more time. Here we go. Okay. Now we need to still add the form and JavaScript for Stripe. So I've done this in other videos, and I might just copy and paste the JavaScript over. Feel free to reference this project on GitHub. I'm going to have it there. You can do what you want with it. But what I'm going to do is create a JavaScript file. Let's go up to, I need to refer to it real quick. I'll just call it purchases. It can be whatever. And I could totally, I'm going to rename this just because. It's all the stuff you'd find on Stripe's docs for Stripe elements. If you want to check that out, feel free to. It basically is a pretty big copy and paste to get it in, but some things are native to our app. One thing I added was user data related to the card field, but obviously not the card number, but just the last 4 digits of the number. So what I'll do is add some JavaScript around that just by referencing my old project, because I don't want to spend way too long on just JavaScript. This is Rails specific stuff, but I'll talk through it. So we're waiting for TurboLinks to load like normal, and then we're going to get our public key based on that meta tag we added to our layout file, which, if you remember, is what we had again in the source, that meta tag in our header. Where is it? Right there. If you look there, cool. We got the content of that. We're going to connect to the Stripe API with JavaScript. Again, we're rendering JavaScript library in our layout as well. So if you go to view, layouts, application, this is important to include in your project. I have version 3 right now. And with that, we can render connect to the API, create a new Stripe elements object. And from there, we can style it in line with whatever we want to do. I'm going to grab the card element on the page, which will be a payment form we're going to have, which I might as well add now. So I'll go ahead and go to Views, Meetings, and create a new partial called Payment Form. Inside that will be a few things. In fact, I might pull this one over as well. It's basically boilerplate code. Just trying to save time. But you can get this stuff from Stripe as well on their documentations. The key thing that's different here is that I have, once a user has a Stripe ID, once they've initialized a transaction and created a charge, they will have a Stripe ID on their account coming up. We still need to run a migration to add these fields. This will error out at this point. So what I want to do is add those fields next, but I'll talk about the JavaScript real quick. First, we're going to look for that card element, which is this thingy here, and Stripe will know what to do with that. It'll render a card form on it and establish the styles that are up here, defined however you want. Then it adds for a change event, handles any errors, and displays those errors if something's wrong, if you enter a card detail wrong or something like that. On the form, we listened for the meeting form. That's where I used it. I couldn't remember, but the form itself, we need to listen for change on, since it's part of this form. As you see, we're going to render it here soon. So when we listen for things that happen there, we can do events and prevent default, apparently. Then we're going to get our token from Stripe and do a sync await kind of stuff. Create a new card object, token object, and then if there's any errors, display those. Otherwise, render the token to the server, which will save. And then once the tokens match up and everything's good, we'll do all these things and submit these parameters behind the scenes. These are going to be what we add in a migration right after this to the users table. And we'll pass in these parameters as parameters in Rails of the Stripe token, the brand, the expiration month, year, and last four. Then we could save those parameters to the database too, which is pretty handy. So all this stuff's happening with JavaScript. It's shaking hands with Rails, and we're able to do all this stuff like in one button click, which is pretty neat. So let's go ahead and create the migration I mentioned, and then I'll render this payment form in. So I'll go into my terminal and do a Rails generate migration. I'm gonna hide this so it's not distracting. I'm gonna call it this, add payment fields to users. Rails is smart enough to know what you mean here. So users, it will look for the users table, but we want to add these things. So Stripe ID is a given, and that's going to be a string. We'll do card brand, brand string, card X month, string, card X year, string, and then card last four, string. So these are just handy things. If a user is already paid with a specific card, it's nice that they know that you at least know that they did, and maybe it will remind them if they make a future purchase what card they use to use later on again and again. Never really implemented the save payment for later kind of thing. I'm not sure how that works and how secure it is, but it might just be something where you're talking to a merchant and saving that data. I don't know. But we'll run this migration. It creates a new migration file. So let's go check that out. So here's all those fields. I want to make sure they're spelled right. I think so. Everything's a string. Be careful not to make this one an integer because it ends up being a pretty long string. Okay, I think that's good. So we'll run Rails DB migrate. Boom. All right, so that's it. We have that in. Next, we can update our meetings controller to accommodate all this logic that's happening. Let's make sure we can render the payment form first in our meetings file. Form file, excuse me. So I hid this, we want that back. Sweet, so it works. We don't have any console errors, I don't think, besides the fact that I should be on the HTTPS server. That's fair. Because I haven't created an account yet or actually paid for something, even though I've already created a session, a typical user wouldn't be able to at this point. We can hook into some validations here that I don't have handy at the moment, but at this point we've got that. We still need the controller logic to make this really work though. So let's go into our meetings controller and update that. So this is going to have our, it's all going to really take place on the create action, and it's going to have, we'll just do it here. We need to get the token. We're going to set some variables, and we're going to get all this through the parameters that come through the JavaScript response. So these are native to Stripe, so that's how I'm queuing that in. Then we can get the card brand. Which could be user card brand. And let me show you why that's user first. On our JavaScript, way down here, I've added this here. So we're already getting the user itself and then grabbing all that stuff and passing it through. So that's how you would access that. And card X month equals params user card. You get the hint, I think. Card last 4. All right, and then we want to initiate the charge. So thanks to the gem, we have access to all this stuff. So we can create a new charge variable and just say charge equals Stripe, hook into that class, the charge class, and then create a charge. Inside that, we can pass in parameters that we want for the charge itself, and that's going to look like amount, and then here's where you can set an amount, and it's in cents, so you need to make it in cents. So this will be $199 in the end. So the currency you can define as USD, description just whatever you want, consultly. Source is going to be the token. This one's important, which is the variable we set at the top here. So we're passing that parameter through to this charge method. And then we can update the user like so. So to initialize this and actually save it in one line, we can do current user dot save, and then boom, make sure it does. Yeah, so with that, we have close to our charge. We want to actually add a rescue card error as well. So at the very end of our block here, I'll put it rescue Stripe card error E flash alert. So on the server side, we can render errors as well, and we'll render the action. basically redirect them back to where they were. So that looks like so. So that is the meetings controller. One thing we still need to add is the admin level stuff, which we'll get into close once the Stripe stuff's fixed up. And then the mailer bit. So I think I'm gonna double check, make sure this works. We can test on a new meeting. I'm just gonna do arbitrary stuff because I'm running out of time here. So 4242424242. There we go. Let's double check Stripe worked. Looks like something came through. Let me go to developers, API, success, for success. What am I looking at here? Events. Looks like that was just now. And we could see the consult lead tag. Where's it at? Right there. So the descriptor is there. Pretty cool. Right on. So that would charge succeeded. If I go back to do another payment or a new submission, my stuff should be saved. You see it there now. So that's all that jazz working. Very cool, guys. So what I want to do next is implement our admin stuff and then go back and add that as well as the mailers, and then that should be it. So let's do that next.